So with that, if you don't mind starting a minute early, I'd like to call upon longtime, well-known Republican activist and conservative who is a candidate for governor, our own Karen Testerman.
Thank you. And for those who don't know, I wanted to say thank you to this committee, because they are the first ones who stood up and said, we are tired of being wishy-washy. We want real Republicans who would adhere to the platform. So I want to say thank you to this board, because you've done an outstanding job and you've been real leaders in this state.
And that puts us on the enemies list for the Sun King.
Well, that's okay. So I've got a question for everybody. How many of you know how many of your rights are in the state constitution? Anybody?
All of them.
All of them.
Well, all of them, yes, but how many? There's not just 10 like there is in the federal constitution. There's actually 39. And if you don't know your rights, you don't know what you're fighting for. You can't have them. So I put together this little book. It says, I Choose to Live Free. It has not only the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence in a nice pocketbook type form, but it also has the original New Hampshire Constitution as well as the current one, so you can actually compare and see what changes have been made. And there have been some significant changes. So I sell these for $10. That's my little advertisement. So anyway, why am I running for governor? We need leadership. Right now, we don't have someone that's going to stand up in front of the federal government and said, no more. You know, this is our state. Leave us alone. Let us make our own decisions. We need someone who's going to say, and it's interesting that Meldrum Thompson, this is back in 1973, said, it's difficult to assess the full extent of our growing addiction for federal money. Unfortunately, millions of federal dollars never pass through your legislative process, which means that, you know, even though in Article 56 of the state constitution, it says that the governor is supposed to only distribute those funds, sign those funds that have gone through the legislative process. And the governor is out here telling everybody what a wonderful job he's done with the taxes and the economy, and it's growing and everything's just hunky-dory. But he's going to the federal government and bringing back their regulations, because don't ever forget, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And so one of the major objections to that $27 million that was finally approved was that there was a stipulation in there that we would follow all the regulations of Health and Human Services whenever they decided that what it was. In other words, don't read the bill, sign it so you can find out what's in it. And we can't do that. Not only that, I believe that the people in this state have the smarts enough to make their own decisions about whether they're essential, non-essential, whether they're going to put their children in private schools or public schools, home schools, wherever it is. It's up to you to make those decisions. And so when the whole thing came down in March of 2020, that we had to put on masks and that we had to you know, separate and not go to certain businesses, etc. That is not the role of the governor. I'm sorry. If you go into the legal side of it, he doesn't have that right to do that. He doesn't have a right to tell you what to do. If you go into the constitutional part of that, he doesn't have the right to do that either. He has the right to tell his own staff what to do, but not you. And yet this governor that we are currently serving under has done nothing but issue executive orders that apply to his people, that's fine, but also emergency orders in the tune of 90 some that told you that you weren't smart enough to do anything. He treated you like a bunch of 2-year-olds. And if I'm in that position, I'm going to turn around and say to you, I trust you to make your own decisions. Here's what the situation is. That is what a governor should be doing. And the governor's role is very limited. And if we look at the Constitution, which is now upside down anyway, we would be limiting what the government actually does. Our Constitution has specific roles for each of the different positions, whether it's your executive, whether it's your legislative, whether it's your judicial. And right now, it's all of those agencies that are running this state. I think a former person that was in the Department of Education says that 75% of the payroll in the state and the Department of Education is run by the federal government. So no wonder he who calls the piper calls the tune. So that's how they can turn around and tell you, you've got to teach critical race theory. And I don't care what they tell you at the local level, critical race theory has already been taught in our schools, and it's already been implemented in our schools, and there's no place for it. So I believe that the parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's futures, so you should be it's your responsibility to decide whether or not your child goes to this school or that school. The department or the school boards, however, are failing in their responsibilities. They're, in Franklin, for example, 60% of our children in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade are in need of intervention. What's their primary role? What is the primary role of the educators? To teach our children how to read and write, right? To take those 26 letters and associate the phonemes that go with them so that they can put them together and figure out that these letters together spell this word, and oh, by the way, at some point we're going to find out what that means and help them to be able to comprehend what they've got. Now, I'm speaking not only as a mother of 4 kids and grandmother of 12, but also as a certified educator. So I taught everything from preschool all the way up into vocational school. And what I know is that it doesn't take a lot of money to teach a child how to read. If they can read and write and comprehend, they don't need anything else. All they need is motivation and encouragement to go out and explore and become the very best that they can in whatever it is they're interested in, right? Someone who can read can teach themselves how to do math because they can read the instructions. And oh, by the way, there are all these bills, there are all these laws on the books in the state of New Hampshire that are not being followed by our schools. If they were, they'd be teaching them cursive writing, they'd be teaching them the multiplication tables, and they'd be teaching them the Constitution, civics, and government for the state of New Hampshire, as well as U.S. And they'd be being tested, and they wouldn't be, I was looking at the reports again today. You can go up to the Department of Education, and they have this thing called iExplore, and you can go in and compare the state results with any community or any community against any community. Reminds me of when my mom used to say, that may be what they're doing over there, but this is my house. So, but you can go up and do that. Well, even the state of New Hampshire that rates so high in the federal level, it's still 60 to 70% of those kids are passing and being proficient. But that means there's 35 or more that aren't. And that is a disservice to our children, and that is mismanagement of your taxpayer dollars. So we need somebody that's going to be there, that's going to look at these things and say no when you're overstepping your boundaries, federal government, get out of my state. We are supposed to be sovereign. And the best thing that we can do is to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves locally, because all politics is local. And if we don't know what our local people are doing, you know, what in the world, how in the world are we supposed to watch those pennies and those dollars? And right now, I don't know what it is in Guilford as far as how much money you're spending, but I do know that in Franklin, which is a city and we're run a little bit differently than you are, but our schools are getting $9 million over the next 3 years, handouts of paper money that's being printed and printed and printed, and putting us in debt, causing our expenses to go sky high. You know, I don't know how many of you have gone to the grocery store lately and seen that not only are the packages getting smaller, the prices are going up, right? Look at what are we spending for gasoline? And every time they're printing all of that money, it's also coming out of your back pocket. You know, if we really analyzed how much money we're spending in the way of taxes, whether it's our gas taxes, our utility taxes, our internet taxes, you keep going on and on and on, in addition to your property taxes, you'll be absolutely amazed at how much money is going out in that direction. The other thing that's going on in the state that bothers me a whole lot is that we are being coerced into paying for organizations that maybe you don't agree with. Or maybe you want somebody to put some money up, but the legislature doesn't approve of it, or the city council doesn't approve of it, or the selectmen don't approve of it. But your money has been tied up and going to someplace that you don't approve. Davy Crockett delivered a speech on the floor of the House, and he said, it's not your money to spend. The only monies that are supposed to be spent by the government are to run the government. And that's, show me in the Constitution where we're supposed to have health and human services. Show me in the Constitution where it says we're supposed to have a Department of Education. Show me in the Constitution where it says we're supposed to have a Department of Labor. How many of these agencies are not supposed to be there, and yet we're paying for it? So we need leadership that's going to say, you know, this Constitution, it means something, and there's some rights in here that we're not getting. We've got a government right now that's telling you that you can't go visit with your senior citizen because they're being quarantined. And these people are dying by themselves, or waving to their relatives outside the window. Or as one family told me that, where they had gone to go visit, but because of the distance requirement, they weren't allowed to hug their senior citizen in there. And your senior doesn't understand why. They see you right there. Why can't we be hugged? How many people are dying in the hospitals and not having their loved one right next door to them? I mean, I had a friend who had to fight to get in to see her husband as he was dying. That's wrong, okay? How many of us, so I do have to tell you a positive story though, because there are good New Hampshire freedom-loving people in this state who said enough is enough. So I went up to Madison and was visiting with a lady who had lost her job because of this last year and a half of silliness. Her husband was probably going to lose his. And so they went out, fortunately, they had stores, and they bought this empty building and turned it into a market. Everybody's in the area is so excited about it coming around. And across the street is a building supply place, right? So I went across the street, I was talking to the sister of the owner, and I asked her, so what's going on here? And she said, well, they came, the sheriff came, or police, law enforcement, came with a cease and desist order. I said, so what did you do? What, because they weren't wearing masks, right? Somebody had reported them. What did you do? Well, we called up Jay Sekulow. He sent a letter to the governor. They haven't bothered us since, right? A few miles down the road, we had this sign on the outside that says, masks are not allowed in this building, right? It's a cigar store. He never shut down. He said, absolutely, this is the way we run our business. So we need a governor who is going to allow the backbone of New Hampshire to continue to thrive. We've lost over 400 of our small businesses. Those are people that can't provide for their children at home. They can't put a roof over their head, or unless they've been really, really very, very careful and foreseen and been able to tuck away enough to keep them going. But until they can find another job, what about these people that are being told that by such and such a date, you have to do, you have to have the inoculation, or you have to have a passport, or you lose your job? What are they supposed to do? We can't have that. We need a governor that's going to say no to the federal government and say, if I trust you to do what's best for you. So that's why I'm running for governor. By the way, I founded Cornerstone Policy Research, which is a family policy council that is there to look at what's going on in the legislature and then provide well-documented information to all of the citizens as well as to, and supporters as well as to the legislature, so that public policymakers can make an informed decision. And that was the primary purpose of it. I stepped down in 2008, and so it's now in Shannon's hands, which is fine. But I just wanted to throw that out there as that was one of the things that I did. I've been fighting for you since I came to this state. I fought for you to turn down the overreach of the federal government in education when they wanted us to sign on to Goals 2000. I fought for you, for families, by starting Cornerstone Policy Research. I worked with Ed Nail to try and expose the election fraud that goes on in this state. So I've been out there working for you, and I want to continue to work for you. So if you have any questions, I'd love to entertain them.
Well, if you want to wait, if you can stick around till the end of the meeting, and that way you can interact on a personal
Sure.
basis and do a Q&A. And if you have your checkbooks handy, I'm sure that the Karen's campaign can use some help. We've got a bunch of other people. Is that okay?
Croc TV.